The forest remembers everything. 20 years ago, in the pine woods of North Carolina, a girl learned what it meant to lose half the world. Emma Caldwell was 7 years old when her mother's body finally surrendered to the cancer that had been eating her alive for 18 months. The funeral was small. Military families know how to bury their dead without making a scene. Her father stood beside the grave in his dress blues, his face carved from stone. Gunnery Sergeant Jack Caldwell, United States Marine Corps, sniper instructor, had faced enemy fire in 3 different countries. But watching his wife's casket lowered into red clay earth broke something in him that no enemy bullet ever could. Emma didn't cry. She stood perfectly still in her black dress, hands folded, watching the other mourners watch her, waiting for her to break. She wouldn't give them that. After everyone left, after the last car disappeared down the cemetery road, Jack knelt beside his daughter. The late afternoon sun cut through the trees at sharp angles. Everything looked too bright, too real. "I'll teach you to be strong," he said. His voice was rough with all the words he couldn't say. "Your mother wanted that. She wanted you to be able to stand on your own." Emma looked up at him with hazel eyes that had already seen too much. "Okay, Daddy." That was the day the world divided into before and after. Before, her mother's laugh filled their small house. After, the silence moved in like a permanent guest. 8 years later, Emma was 19, and her father was teaching her things that girls weren't supposed to know. The shooting range was 2 hours from their house, deep in national forest where nobody asked questions about a Marine teaching his daughter advanced marksmanship. The morning air was cold enough to see your breath. October in the Appalachians painted the world in fire colors. Jack set up the target at 300 meters. A standard paper silhouette, nothing fancy. He handed Emma a rifle that was almost as tall as she was. A Remington 700 in .308 caliber. The same rifle he'd used to qualify as a Marine Scout sniper 20 years ago. "Feel the weapon," he said. "Don't just hold it, feel it." Emma settled into position behind the rifle, cheek against the stock, eye aligned with the scope. Her heartbeat was a drum in her ears. Her father had taught her to listen to it, to time her breathing to its rhythm. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked against her shoulder. 300 meters downrange, the paper target's center mass developed a hole exactly where she'd aimed. Jack looked through his spotting scope and went very still. He looked again, adjusting focus, making sure he was seeing what he thought he was seeing. "Do that again," he said quietly. Emma chambered another round and fired. Same result. Dead center. 5 more shots, 5 more perfect impacts, clustered in a group no bigger than a playing card. Jack lowered his spotting scope and looked at his daughter like he was seeing her for the first time. "You're not guessing where to aim, are you?" Emma shook her head. "I can feel when it's right, like the rifle tells me." "Feel how?" She struggled to find words for something that had no words. "The vibration. When I settle into position, if everything's perfect, the rifle feels different, like it's humming at the right frequency. If something's off, the cant angle, the cheek weld, anything, it feels wrong. So I adjust until it feels right again." Jack sat back on his heels. He'd trained hundreds of Marines. Some were natural shots, some worked hard to get good. But he'd never seen anything like this. His daughter wasn't reading wind or calculating ballistics. She was sensing the weapon's harmony with the target at a level that shouldn't be possible. "That's a gift, Emma," he finally said. "A real gift. But you can't let it make you arrogant. Gifts get people killed when they stop thinking and start trusting too much." Emma nodded, but she was still looking downrange at the target, at the tight cluster of holes she'd put there, at proof she could do something extraordinary. "Promise me," Jack said, gripping her shoulder. "Promise me you'll never let confidence override judgment. The shot you don't take is sometimes the most important shot of your life." "I promise, Daddy." He pulled her into a hug, and for just a moment, the haunted look in his eyes softened. Like maybe his wife had left him something precious after all. Something worth protecting. 3 years later, Jack Caldwell was dead. October 2024, Fort Benning, Georgia, present day. The weapons maintenance workshop smelled the way it always did, gun oil and metal, and the particular acrid tang of carbon-fument residue. The overhead fluorescent lights hummed their endless, monotone song. Rows of rifles waited on the racks like sleeping soldiers. Emma Caldwell sat at her workbench with a Barrett M82 50 caliber rifle disassembled in front of her. She was 27 years old now, though people often thought she looked younger. 5'6", 125 pounds. Her brown hair pulled back in the same simple ponytail she wore every single day. No makeup, no jewelry, steel-toed boots and gray coveralls that were 2 sizes too big. She'd been working in this shop for 3.5 years. 3.5 years of showing up at 0700, working until 1700, going home to her small apartment, and doing it all again the next day. The same routine, the same silence, the same careful invisibility. Her hands moved with practiced precision, cleaning carbon buildup from the Barrett's bolt carrier group. A small wire brush, carefully applied solvent, patient circular motions. The work was meditative. It required enough focus to keep other thoughts away. The door banged open. Brad Hoffman walked in carrying an M4 carbine. He was 35, built like someone who'd been an athlete in high school and hadn't quite accepted that high school was over. He dropped the M4 on the counter with more force than necessary. "Caldwell," he called out, "you done playing with that 50 yet? I need this M4 looked at. Ejector's acting up." Emma didn't look up. "I'll get to it after I finish this." "Yeah, well, some of us have actual quals to run. Can't all just clean guns all day like it's arts and crafts time." Mike Patterson laughed from the other side of the shop. He was 38, graying at the temples, with a particular smugness of someone who'd been in the same job too long and mistook seniority for competence. "Careful, Brad. Caldwell might file a complaint. Say we're creating a hostile work environment. I'm just saying, 3 years here and she still can't field strip an M4 in under 2 minutes. My 11-year-old nephew can do it in 90 seconds. Emma set down her cleaning brush very carefully. She kept her voice level. "I can field strip an M4 in 42 seconds. I just choose to take my time because rushing leads to mistakes." Brad snorted. "Sure you can. That why you're stuck on cleaning detail while actual armorers handle the precision work?" She didn't answer. There was no point. Brad and Mike had decided who she was the day she started working here. A girl who'd wandered into a man's job. Someone to tolerate but never respect. No combat experience, no deployment patches, no proof she belonged. They didn't know what she'd done before coming here. They didn't know why she'd chosen a job that kept her invisible, and she wasn't about to tell them. Mike tossed a shop rag at her. "Hey, while you're at it, the floor could use mopping. Spilled some solvent by the spray booth." Emma caught the rag, looked at it, looked at Mike, said nothing. "That's what I thought," Mike said, turning back to his work. Emma went back to cleaning the Barrett. Her hands were steady. They were always steady. Routine as armor against chaos. But underneath the calm surface, memory waited. Kandahar, the scope, the trigger pull, everything that came after. She pushed it down with the practice of 3 years, locked it away in the same mental compartment where she kept all the things that could destroy her if she let them. The door opened again. This time, everyone in the shop went quiet. Colonel Garrett Thorne walked in like he owned the space, which in a way, he did. Not officially, he was a civilian contractor now, teaching ballistics to officer candidates. But he'd spent 30 years in Delta Force before the Army decided his opinions were too inconvenient. Men like Thorne carry authority the way other people carry car keys. It's just always there. He was 67 years old, broad-shouldered despite his age, with white hair cut military short and a scar that ran from his left temple down to his jaw. Ice blue eyes that missed nothing. He wore civilian clothes, khaki pants, a blue button-down shirt, but he moved like someone who'd spent his entire life in uniform. Brad straightened up instinctively. "Colonel Thorne, can I help you with something, sir?" Thorne didn't look at him. He walked directly to Emma's workbench and stopped, looking down at the disassembled Barrett. "I need to ask you something technical," he said. His voice was gravel and smoke. "Is a 3,800-meter kill shot physically possible?" The shop went silent. Brad and Mike both turned to stare. Emma's hands stopped moving. She looked up at Thorne for the first time. Brad laughed nervously. "Colonel, she just cleans guns. You want ballistics analysis, Mike and I can—" "I'm asking her," Thorne said, still not looking at Brad. His eyes were locked on Emma. Emma felt something shift in the air. This wasn't a casual question. This was a test, or a trap, or both. She looked at the Barrett in front of her, looked at Thorne, saw something in his expression that made her decide to answer honestly. "At 3,800 meters, she said slowly, bullet flight time exceeds 10 seconds. You're dealing with significant Coriolis effect. At that range, the Earth's rotation causes approximately 18 inches of horizontal drift. Wind is the primary variable. Even a steady 15-mile-per-hour wind adds 6 feet of deviation. You have to account for air density, temperature differentials, barometric pressure. The bullet's velocity drops below the speed of sound, which affects stability. The scope's zero has to be absolutely perfect because even a 1 minute of angle error becomes catastrophic at that distance." She paused, aware that Brad and Mike were staring at her like she'd started speaking Mandarin. "Shooter would need a 50 caliber minimum. Match-grade ammunition, not standard military issue. Military-grade optics, something that can hold zero at extreme ranges. And even with all that, you're fighting physics that most people don't understand exist." She met Thorne's eyes. "But yes, sir, physically possible." Thorne's expression didn't change, but something in his posture relaxed slightly, like he'd been waiting for exactly that answer. "Someone made that shot 6 months ago," he said quietly, "in hostile territory, saved American lives, eliminated a high-value target that had been untouchable. But we don't know who did it. The rifle was found at the firing position, wiped completely clean. No fingerprints, no DNA, nothing." Emma felt her pulse quicken. "What kind of rifle?" "Barrett M82, 50 caliber. Thorne gestured at the weapon in front of her. "Same model you're working on right now. That specific rifle passed through this armory 9 months ago for maintenance. The scope mounting technique on the rifle we recovered matches the precision work done here. Professional grade, perfect alignment. Someone who really knew what they were doing." Emma's mouth went dry. 9 months ago. She remembered that Barrett. She remembered checking the scope rings, finding a hairline crack, replacing them, recalibrating the entire system. She remembered the careful work, the satisfaction of getting everything perfectly aligned. "I work on every Barrett on this base," she said carefully. "That doesn't mean—" "I know," Thorne interrupted. "I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm asking if you remember who showed particular interest in that rifle, who asked questions, who wanted to understand extreme-range ballistics." Emma thought back. 9 months ago seemed like a lifetime. She'd been deep in her routine then, going through motions, trying not to think about anything beyond the immediate task in front of her. But there had been someone, a soldier she'd never seen before. Younger, maybe 28, average height, athletic build. He'd come into the shop asking technical questions that were more sophisticated than the usual "Why won't my rifle shoot straight?" complaints. "There was someone," she said slowly. "I don't know his name. He was interested in cold bore shots. Wanted to know how much the first round from a completely cold barrel would differ from follow-up shots. That's a pretty specific question." "What else?" "He asked about wind calculations at ranges over 3,000 meters, about the Coriolis effect, how to compensate. He seemed like he already knew the answers, like he was confirming information rather than learning it." What did he look like? Emma closed her eyes, trying to pull up the memory. Late 20s, maybe 5'10", 5'11", dark hair. He had a tattoo on his left forearm. I noticed it because it was detailed work, a compass design, not the usual skull or unit insignia you see. Thorne pulled out his phone and swiped through several images. He held one up for Emma to see. This him? Emma looked at the photo. A young man in army dress uniform, standing at attention. Dark eyes, strong jaw, the particular intensity that combat veterans carry in their expression. And there, visible at the edge of the frame, the compass tattoo on his left forearm. That's him, she said. Thorne put the phone away. Sergeant First Class Tyler Brennan, 28 years old, 75th Ranger Regiment, one of the best snipers in the military. Multiple deployments, commendations for valor, expert marksmanship badges in 3 different weapon systems. He paused. Went missing 7 months ago. 2 weeks before that 3,800-meter shot was made. Emma felt the world tilt slightly. Missing how? Scheduled to deploy with his unit. Never showed up for the transport. His barracks room was empty. Personal effects gone. He just vanished. Thorne's expression was grim. His spotter, Chris Coleman, had been killed 9 months earlier. Ambush. Bad intelligence led a convoy into a kill zone. 8 soldiers died that day. Emma's breath caught. The timeline was clear now. Chris dies. Tyler comes to her shop asking questions. Tyler disappears. An impossible shot is made. A ghost sniper hunting ghosts. The intelligence failure was investigated, Thorne continued, or it was supposed to be. Senior officer in the chain of command falsified reports to cover up the mistakes. Protect his career. No one was held accountable. Those 8 deaths were filed under acceptable combat losses and forgotten. Except Tyler Brennan didn't forget, Emma said quietly. No, he didn't. Thorne looked at the Barrett again, then back at Emma. The target that was eliminated 6 months ago? He was connected to the group that ambushed that convoy. Tyler spent months tracking him down, and when he found him, he made a shot that shouldn't exist outside of theory. Emma's hands were shaking now. She clasped them together, willing them to be still. Why are you telling me this? Because Tyler Brennan is planning another shot. We have intelligence suggesting he's targeting the officer who covered up the investigation. A colonel named Philip Harrington. Thorne leaned closer. And we think he might come back here. Back to someone who understands what he's attempting. Someone who answered his questions once without asking why. I didn't help him, Emma said quickly. I just answered technical questions. I know. But he might see it differently. He might think you understand. That you're someone who gets why precision matters at that level. The workshop door opened again. 2 men entered. One was in his mid-30s, Army captain's bars on his uniform, moving with the particular confidence of special operations. The other was older, maybe 50, in civilian clothes that screamed federal agent. Miss Caldwell, the captain said, his voice clipped and professional. I'm Captain Liam Cross, Criminal Investigation Division. This is Agent Victor Kane, also CID. We need to talk to you about Sergeant Tyler Brennan. Emma looked from Cross to Kane to Thorne. Thorne's expression was unreadable, but something in his eyes suggested this was about to get complicated. Brad and Mike had stopped even pretending to work. They were watching with the particular fascination of people who've just discovered the quiet coworker has a secret life. Am I under investigation? Emma asked, keeping her voice steady. No, Kane said. He had salt and pepper hair and the weathered face of someone who'd spent decades dealing with humanity's uglier moments. But we believe Tyler Brennan may attempt to contact you. We'd like your cooperation in apprehending him before he hurts someone. Or himself. I barely know him. He came into the shop once, asked some questions. That was 9 months ago. But you answered his questions, Cross said. You gave him information about extreme-range ballistics, information he used to make a shot that should have been impossible. I answered technical questions all day. That's part of my job. I had no idea what he was planning. We understand that, Kane said, his voice softer than Cross's. We're not blaming you, but we need your help. Tyler Brennan is a decorated soldier who's heading down a very dark path. If he succeeds in targeting Colonel Harrington, he'll spend the rest of his life in military prison. If he fails, he might kill innocent people in the attempt. Either way, we lose a good man to trauma he should have received help for. Emma looked at Thorne. What do you want from me? Thorne's expression was still unreadable. I want you to help save a soldier's life, but I think we should have this conversation somewhere more private. He gestured toward the door. Kane and Cross nodded. Emma stood slowly, aware that Brad and Mike were watching her like she'd transformed into a different species right before their eyes. As she walked past Brad's workstation, he actually took a step back, like proximity to her might be dangerous. Good, Emma thought. Let them wonder. Let them question every assumption they'd made about who she was. Because the truth was, they'd never known her at all. Thorne drove his truck to a small diner 3 miles from the base, the kind of place where military and locals mingled over mediocre coffee and excellent pie. They sat in a corner booth, far from other customers. Kane and Cross sat on one side, Thorne and Emma on the other. Emma ordered coffee she didn't want and waited for someone to explain why her carefully constructed invisible life was falling apart. Kane opened a folder and laid out several surveillance photos. Tyler Brennan in various locations. Airports, border crossings, foreign cities. Always alone. Always moving. After he went missing, we tracked unusual activity, Kane explained. Someone with military training moving through countries where we had active operations, staying ahead of our intelligence. 3 times we almost caught him. 3 times he vanished before we could close in. And then, 6 months ago, Cross added, a high-value target was located in hostile territory. We planned a major operation to capture him for interrogation. But before our team could move in, someone took the shot from 3,800 meters away. Target eliminated instantly. Our team searched the area, found the rifle, but no shooter. Tyler saved American lives that day, Kane said. The target's forces scattered when he was killed. Our team extracted without casualties. If we'd gone in to capture him, we'd have faced heavy resistance. Some of our people might have died. But, Cross said, his tone hardening, he also destroyed valuable intelligence. That target had information about networks, operations, personnel, information we needed. Tyler's shot set back our intelligence operations in that region by months. Emma looked at the photos. Tyler Brennan's face in various lighting, various contexts, always with the same expression, haunted, determined, someone carrying weight that shouldn't be carried alone. So what is he? Emma asked. Hero or criminal? Both, Thorne said quietly. It was the first time he'd spoken since they sat down. He's a good man who watched his best friend die and couldn't get justice through proper channels. So he decided to create his own justice. And now he can't stop. Kane pulled out another photo. Colonel Philip Harrington, late 50s, graying hair, the particular polish of career officers who've mastered looking good in uniform. He was shaking hands with a general at some official function. Harrington was the senior intelligence officer who should have caught the errors that got Chris Coleman killed, Kane explained. Instead, he covered them up, falsified reports, protected his career at the expense of 8 dead soldiers and their families. And he faced no consequences? Emma asked. He was quietly reassigned. Desk job. No court-martial, no public reprimand. The Army wanted to avoid embarrassing questions about how our intelligence system could fail so catastrophically. That's why Tyler disappeared, Thorne said. The system failed. His friend died because someone made mistakes and then lied about it, and nobody in authority cared enough to fix it. Emma understood that feeling. She understood it all too well. "So what do you want from me?" she asked again. Kane and Cross exchanged looks. Finally, Kane spoke. "We want you to be bait." The coffee in Emma's stomach suddenly felt like acid. "Excuse me?" "We believe Tyler Brennan may try to contact you," Kane continued. "You're someone who understands precision weapons. Someone who answered his questions without judgment. If he needs help with another shot, if he needs technical advice, you're one of the few people who could give it to him. So you want me to betray someone who came to me for help? We want you to save him from himself," Thorne said. His voice was gentle, but firm. "Tyler Brennan is on a path that ends in prison or death. Probably both. If we can intercept him before he makes another attempt, maybe we can get him the help he should have received when Chris died." Emma stared at her coffee, at her reflection in the dark liquid. She looked tired. She looked like someone who'd been hiding for a very long time. "How do you even know he'll contact me?" "We don't," Cross admitted. "But you're one of his few connections to normalcy, to a time before everything went wrong. If he reaches out to anyone from his past life, it might be you." "I met him once, for maybe 15 minutes. That's not a connection." "Maybe not," Thorne said, "but you're also the daughter of Jack Caldwell. And Tyler Brennan's spotter, Chris Coleman, served with Jack before Jack died. Chris talked about you, about Jack's daughter who had a gift with rifles. Tyler knows who you are, Emma, even if you don't realize it." Emma's head snapped up. "What?" Thorne pulled out his phone and brought up a screenshot of a military email. He slid it across the table. The email was from Chris Coleman to several recipients. Subject line, "Remembering the Good Ones." It was a tribute to fallen soldiers, written a few weeks before Chris himself was killed. Halfway through, there was a paragraph about Jack Caldwell. "Gunny Caldwell taught me that shooting was only half the skill. The other half was knowing when not to shoot. He said his daughter understood that better than anyone. Said she could read a weapon like other people read books. She's got the gift and the smarts not to let it make her arrogant. Wish I could meet her someday. Bet she's doing something amazing." Emma's vision blurred. She blinked hard, refusing to cry in front of these men. Chris Coleman had written that about her, had thought she was doing something amazing. If he could see her now, cleaning rifles in a basement workshop, hiding from her own history, would he still think that? "Tyler read that email," Thorne said softly. "He knows who you are. He knows you're Jack Caldwell's daughter. And if he's smart, and he is, he's probably figured out why you're working as a basic technician instead of doing something that matches your abilities." Emma looked up at Thorne, really looked at him, at the scar on his face, at the weight in his eyes. "You knew my father." "I did. We served together in Delta. Jack Caldwell was the best sniper I ever worked with, and the most ethical. He took the shot when it was right and held fire when it wasn't. That kind of judgment is rarer than people think." "How did you know I was here?" Thorne's smile was sad. "I promised Jack I'd watch over you if anything happened to him. Took me a while to find you. You're good at disappearing. But when I heard about this investigation, about a mysteriously skilled technician at Fort Benning who nobody knew anything about, I had a feeling." Emma felt tears threatening again. Pushed them down. "What did my father tell you about me?" "He said you had a gift, that you could do things with a rifle that shouldn't be possible. But he also said you cared too much, that you'd take on guilt that wasn't yours to carry." Thorne leaned forward. "He said if you ever disappeared, it would be because you thought you didn't deserve to be found." The tears came then, silent and hot. Emma wiped them away roughly. "I killed a child," she whispered. 4 years ago, Kandahar province. I was a civilian contractor, providing overwatch for supply convoys. I made a 2,100-meter shot at an insurgent who was setting up an ambush. Perfect conditions, perfect calculations. I controlled my breathing, checked my wind holds, did everything by the book." She looked down at her hands. They were shaking now. "The wind shifted half a second before the bullet arrived. Just a small gust. Nothing my instruments detected. The bullet deviated 14 inches. Hit a 9-year-old girl instead. She was playing with a doll 20 feet from the insurgent. I watched through my scope as she fell. Watched her mother run to her. I can still see the dust cloud when they hit the ground. The booth was silent. Cross and Kane exchanged looks. Thorne just watched her with those ice-blue eyes. Her name was Nadia, Emma continued, her voice breaking. I found that out later, from reports. 9 years old. She had 3 brothers. Her father was a shopkeeper. She wasn't a combatant. She wasn't a threat. She was just a child playing in the wrong place at the wrong time. I came here to hide, Emma said, to punish myself. I thought if I only fixed guns, never fired them, maybe I could atone for taking a life that didn't deserve to be taken. I thought if I made myself invisible, maybe I could disappear from my own memories. And has it worked? Thorne asked gently. No, it hasn't worked at all. I still see her every night, still hear that sound, still feel the moment when everything went wrong. Thorne reached across the table and gripped her hand. His grip was strong, anchor solid. Jack told me what would happen if things went wrong for you. He said you'd do exactly this. Hide, punish yourself, try to disappear. He made me promise that if I ever found you like this, I'd drag you back into the light, whether you wanted to come or not. Emma looked at their joined hands, at the liver spots on Thorne's weathered skin, at proof that time passed whether you hid from it or not. I don't know if I can help you, she said finally. I don't know if I'm strong enough. You're Jack Caldwell's daughter, Thorne said. You're stronger than you know. He believed that. I believe that. The question is whether you believe it. Emma pulled her hand back, wiped her face, looked at Kane and Cross. If I do this, if I help you, what happens to Tyler Brennan? That depends, Kane said carefully. If he surrenders peacefully, there will be a court-martial. He'll face charges for desertion, for conducting unauthorized operations. But we can argue mitigating circumstances. PTSD from watching his spotter die. Failure of the system to address legitimate grievances. He might get prison time, but not as much as he would for murder. And if he doesn't surrender? Nobody answered that question. They didn't have to. Emma looked at Thorne one more time, saw her father in the lines of his face, saw all the years Jack Caldwell had spent teaching her to be strong, to be smart, to know when to take the shot and when to hold fire. The hardest shot is the one you don't take, her father had said, because it means you have to live with all the possibilities of what might have happened. Maybe it was time to stop hiding from possibilities. Okay, Emma said, I'll help, but I need you to promise me something. What? Kane asked. If we find Tyler Brennan, if we get him to surrender, you do everything you can to get him real help. Not just prison, actual treatment for what he's been through. He deserves that much. Thorne smiled slightly. You sound like your father. Good, Emma said. That's the best thing anyone said to me in 4 years. They left the diner as the sun was setting. The October sky was on fire with colors that hurt to look at. Emma got into Thorne's truck, and they drove back toward the base in comfortable silence. As they pulled into the parking lot, Thorne finally spoke. Emma, there's something you should know about why I'm really here. She looked at him, waited. Your father's last words before that IED went off. He was on comms with me. He said, if anything happens, find Emma. Tell her she's special. Tell her she doesn't know how to forgive herself. But tell her I forgive her for everything. Tell her to live. Emma's throat closed up. She couldn't speak. I'm telling you now, Thorne said quietly. Your father forgave you for everything you think you did wrong. Every mistake you blame yourself for. He forgave it all before he died. The question is when you'll forgive yourself. Emma nodded, unable to trust her voice. Thorne reached into the back seat and pulled out a worn leather journal. This was your father's, his shooting journal. Every significant shot he ever made, every lesson he learned, it's all in here. He wanted you to have it when you were ready. Thorne handed it to her. I think you're ready now. Emma took the journal with shaking hands. The leather was soft with age and use. She opened it to a random page. Her father's handwriting, precise and controlled, filled the lines. She flipped to the final entry, dated 3 days before he died. Emma will be better than me. Not because she shoots better, though she does, but because she cares more. The best snipers aren't the ones who never miss. They're the ones who understand the weight of every shot they take. She understands that weight. It will make her suffer, but it will also make her great when she's ready. Emma closed the journal and pressed it against her chest, felt the tears come again, hot and cleansing this time. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me yet, Thorne said. We still have work to do. Tyler Brennan is out there somewhere, planning something that could destroy him, and you might be the only person who can reach him. Emma looked out at the base, at the lights coming on as darkness fell, at all the young soldiers moving through their routines, not knowing that some of them carried invisible wounds that would never heal without help. Then I guess we'd better get started, she said. Thorne smiled. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked hopeful. Welcome back to the world, Emma Caldwell. Your father would be proud. The surveillance equipment arrived the next morning in unmarked boxes. 2 CID technicians spent 4 hours installing micro cameras in the overhead lights of Emma's workshop, in the ventilation grates, in places so small and hidden that even someone looking for them would have trouble spotting them. Emma watched them work, feeling like her skin was being fitted with new nerves. Every moment would be recorded now. Every conversation, every gesture, every flicker of expression captured and analyzed by people she'd never meet. Agent Kane handed her the panic button. It looked exactly like a car key fob, black plastic with a single red button disguised as an unlock switch. Press it once and tactical teams would converge on her location within minutes. Keep it with you at all times, Kane said. In your pocket, on your person, not in your bag or locker where you might not be able to reach it. Emma turned the device over in her hands. Such a small thing to represent the difference between control and chaos. What if I press it by accident? Better a false alarm than hesitation when you need it. Kane's expression was serious. Tyler Brennan is highly trained. If he approaches you, he'll be assessing threat levels the entire time. Any sudden movements, any obvious signals, and he'll bolt. Or worse. Worse how? Kane didn't answer immediately. Finally, he's desperate. Desperate people do desperate things. We don't think he'd hurt you, but we can't guarantee it. Captain Cross leaned against the workbench, arms crossed. He'd been skeptical of Emma from the start, she could tell. To him, she was a liability, an unknown quantity in an operation that required precision. You understand you're not an agent, Cross said. You're not trained for this. If Brennan makes contact, your job is simple. Keep him talking. Don't try to apprehend him. Don't try to be a hero. Signal for help and let professionals handle it. Emma met his eyes. I understand. Do you? Because in my experience, civilians think they know what they're getting into until bullets start flying. Then training is the only thing that keeps you alive. Captain Cross, Thorne's voice cut through the tension like a blade. He'd been standing in the corner, watching silently. Now he stepped forward. Emma understands the risks. She also understands Tyler Brennan in ways we don't. Sometimes empathy is better than training. Cross turned to face Thorne. With respect, Colonel, empathy doesn't stop someone from getting killed. Neither does tactical entry when the subject is looking for an excuse to die. Thorne's voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. Tyler Brennan is a special operations soldier with nothing left to lose. If you storm in with guns drawn, he'll fight. Someone will die. Maybe him, maybe one of your people, maybe someone who just happened to be in the wrong place. Is that what you want? Cross's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Kane stepped between them. We all want the same thing, to bring Tyler in safely and prevent anyone else from getting hurt. We use every tool we have, including Emma. The technicians finished their work and packed up their equipment. Kane handed Emma a phone that looked identical to her own, but had tracking and recording software embedded in every function. Use this from now on. If Brennan contacts you by phone, we'll know immediately. Emma took the phone, added it to the growing collection of surveillance that was turning her life into a stage where everyone watched, but only she performed. After they left, Thorne stayed behind. He walked the perimeter of the workshop, checking angles, noting exits. Finally, he came back to Emma's workbench. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. "I know Kane and Cross made it sound mandatory, but you're a civilian. You can walk away. And let Tyler Brennan destroy himself? It might not be your responsibility to save him." Emma looked down at her hands, the same hands that had held a rifle steady while a child died 2,000 meters away. The same hands that had cleaned weapons for 3 years, trying to scrub away guilt that couldn't be cleaned. "My father used to say that responsibility isn't about what you're required to do. It's about what you can't live with if you don't do it." Thorne smiled slightly. Jack said that a lot, usually right before doing something dangerous and probably against regulations. Did it work? His philosophy? He saved a lot of lives, made some enemies in command, but he slept well at night. That's more than most soldiers can say. Emma picked up a cleaning cloth and began wiping down her workstation. The familiar motions were soothing. Control the things you can control. "Colonel Thorne, can I ask you something?" "Garrett, just Garrett. I'm not active duty anymore." "Garrett, then. Why did you really come looking for me? Not just because of my father's promise. You could have watched from a distance, made sure I was okay without getting involved. Why insert yourself into this?" Thorne was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried weight that went beyond words. 15 years ago, I questioned intelligence that I knew was faulty. Intelligence that would have sent a Delta team into an ambush. I pushed back, filed reports, made noise. The intelligence was coming from a colonel who was politically connected, someone whose career trajectory pointed to stars on his shoulders. He didn't like being questioned by a subordinate. What happened? The mission went forward with modified parameters. No one died, but it was close, too close, and I was quietly pushed out. Early retirement with full benefits and an understanding that if I kept my mouth shut, my pension was secure. If I talked, things would get difficult. You took the deal. I did, and I've regretted it every day since. Thorne's expression was haunted. Not because I needed to be a martyr, but because my silence enabled the system to keep failing. 6 months after I left, the same colonel provided faulty intelligence that got 11 soldiers killed. If I'd spoken up, if I'd fought harder, maybe those soldiers would still be alive. Emma understood. The weight of choices not made, the mathematics of what-ifs. "The colonel you questioned, was it Harrington?" Thorne nodded. "Philip Harrington has been providing convenient intelligence for 20 years. Intelligence that protects careers and political interests. Sometimes it's accurate. Sometimes soldiers die. He doesn't seem to distinguish between the two. And now Tyler Brennan is hunting him. Tyler is trying to do what I should have done 15 years ago. Stand up and demand accountability. The difference is he's doing it with a rifle instead of through proper channels. Because proper channels failed him. Yes, they did." Thorne looked directly at Emma. "That's why I'm here. Because I failed to fight the system when I had the chance. I'm not going to fail Tyler Brennan the same way. Or you." Emma felt something shift in her chest, a loosening of the tight knot she'd been carrying since Kandahar. She wasn't alone in understanding how systems failed and how people paid the price. "Then I guess we'd better not fail," she said. Thorne gripped her shoulder briefly, a gesture that carried her father's strength through the connection between old comrades. "Your father trained you well, Emma, not just in shooting, in thinking. Trust that training. When the moment comes, you'll know what to do." He left as the afternoon shift began. Brad and Mike came in, both of them giving Emma strange looks. Word had spread that CID was investigating something involving her. In the military, rumors move faster than official communications. Brad kept his distance, didn't make jokes, didn't ask her to mop floors. Mike actually nodded at her when he passed her workstation. A small gesture, but significant. Fear looked like respect from certain angles. Emma returned to her routine, cleaning weapons, checking serial numbers, logging maintenance in the computer system. The cameras watched her work. Somewhere, analysts were reviewing footage, looking for patterns, preparing for an approach that might never come. The days blended together. Wake up, work, go home, repeat. But now every moment carried tension. Every person who entered the workshop was assessed. Every conversation was analyzed for hidden meanings. On day 4, a young private brought in a rifle with a damaged extractor. He couldn't have been more than 19, nervous and apologetic about the malfunction. Emma walked him through proper maintenance procedures, showing him how to check for carbon buildup that could cause extraction failures. The private listened with the intense focus of someone genuinely trying to learn. When he left, he thanked her 3 times, called her ma'am, even though she was a civilian. That night, alone in her apartment, Emma cried. Not from sadness, but from the sudden realization that teaching felt like purpose. Helping that young private understand his weapon had given her more satisfaction than 3 years of hiding. Maybe Thorne was right. Maybe living meant more than just surviving. Day 7, day 10, day 14. The routine continued. The cameras watched. Nothing happened. Emma started to wonder if the whole operation was pointless. Maybe Tyler Brennan wasn't coming. Maybe he'd moved on to other plans, other methods. Maybe she was just going through the motions of surveillance theater while life continued around her. On day 16, everything changed. It was early afternoon. Emma was working on a particularly stubborn bolt assembly, fighting with carbon buildup that had welded itself into microscopic crevices. Brad and Mike were on the other side of the shop, arguing about football scores with the intensity that men bring to meaningless disputes. The door opened. Emma looked up reflexively, the way she'd done 1,000 times over the past weeks. A woman stood in the doorway. She was young, maybe 26, with dark hair pulled back in a braid. She wore civilian clothes, jeans and a plain green jacket, nothing remarkable. But her eyes were remarkable. They were sharp and observant, scanning the workshop in 2 seconds and cataloging every detail. The eyes of someone trained to assess threats and opportunities simultaneously. She walked directly to Emma's workstation. Didn't hesitate, didn't look around. She knew exactly where she was going. "I need help," the woman said. Her voice carried a slight accent, Eastern European, maybe Russian or Ukrainian. "I'm looking for someone who really understands firearms, not basic maintenance, the science behind long-range accuracy." Emma's heart rate spiked. Her hand moved subtly toward her pocket, where the panic button waited. But she forced herself to maintain normal breathing, normal posture. "Don't signal, not yet." "I do precision work," Emma said carefully. "What exactly do you need?" The woman pulled a folded piece of paper from her jacket and placed it on the workbench. Emma unfolded it slowly, aware that every movement was being recorded by the hidden cameras. The paper contained detailed technical specifications for a Macmillan TAC-50 rifle. Ballistics calculations, wind drift compensations, bullet drop charts. The numbers went up to 4,000 meters. 4,000 meters. 300 meters farther than the shot Tyler Brennan had already made. Emma's mouth went dry. She studied the calculations, buying time, trying to decide when to press the panic button. Too soon and the woman might flee before revealing anything useful. Too late and things could go very wrong. "Where did you get these?" Emma asked. "From someone who needs to know if they're correct." The woman's eyes never left Emma's face. "Someone who said there's a technician on this base who would understand. Someone who helped him before without asking too many questions." Emma heard footsteps outside the workshop. Normal base traffic, but maybe also tactical teams moving into position. How long would it take after she pressed the button? 2 minutes? 5? I don't help people plan violence, Emma said. This isn't violence, it's justice. The woman leaned forward slightly. The man being targeted is responsible for deaths of innocent people, American soldiers. Your government knows about him, but won't act because of politics and diplomacy. So someone has to. By taking a shot from 4,000 meters, that's not justice. That's attempted murder with extra steps. Is it murder to stop someone who will kill again if left unchecked? Emma's hand found the panic button in her pocket. Her thumb rested on the trigger. Not yet. Just a little longer. These calculations, Emma said, pointing at the paper, they're mostly correct, but there are errors. The Coriolis effect compensation is off. At this latitude, you need to account for an additional 6 inches of drift. And the temperature gradient assumptions are wrong. At 4,000 meters, you're dealing with multiple atmospheric layers. The bullet path crosses different air densities. You can't use a single temperature value. The woman listened intently. Can you fix them? I could, but I won't. Emma met the woman's eyes. Because at 4,000 meters, even with perfect calculations, you can't guarantee precision. The margin of error is too large. You might hit your target. You might hit someone innocent standing nearby. You might miss entirely, and the bullet keeps traveling until it hits something or someone else. You're not talking about a surgical strike. You're talking about throwing a dart from across a football field and hoping it lands where you want. Tyler said you'd understand the risks. He said you'd made an impossible shot once. He said you'd know what it means to try anyway. Emma pressed the panic button. The woman's expression changed instantly. Not surprise, but resignation, like she'd been expecting this. He said you might do that, the woman said quietly. He hoped you wouldn't, but he understood if you did. She reached into her jacket pocket. Emma tensed, preparing for a weapon. But the woman pulled out a small photograph and placed it on the workbench next to the calculations. The photo showed 2 young men in Army combat uniforms, arms around each other's shoulders, grinning at the camera. One of them was Tyler Brennan. The other was younger, maybe 22, with the open face of someone who hadn't yet seen enough of war to lose his optimism. Chris Coleman, the woman said, 22 years old, engaged to be married, died in an ambush because someone provided bad intelligence and then covered it up. Tyler watched his best friend bleed out, held him while he died, and then was told it was just one of those things, casualties of war, move on. Emma stared at the photograph, at Chris Coleman's smile, at the proof that he'd been a real person with hopes and plans and people who loved him. Tyler doesn't want revenge, the woman continued. He wants accountability. He wants the man responsible to face consequences. But the system protects its own, so Tyler has to create consequences himself. By killing someone? By forcing the system to pay attention. The woman pulled the photograph back. Tyler calculated the shot to miss Colonel Harrington by exactly 2 feet, to shatter the window next to him, to prove that someone can reach him, that no amount of security or rank makes him untouchable. A message, not murder. You can't control 2 feet at 4,000 meters, Emma said urgently. Physics doesn't allow that kind of precision. A gust of wind, a thermal shift, anything could push the bullet those 2 feet. And then someone dies, someone who might be innocent. The woman studied Emma for a long moment. Then she glanced toward the door, toward the sound of vehicles approaching fast. You called them, the woman said. It wasn't a question. I had to. I know. The woman backed toward the door. Tyler said if anyone could stop him, it would be you. He said Jack Caldwell's daughter would understand both why it has to be done and why it shouldn't be. He said you'd choose the right thing, even if it meant betraying someone who needs help. She pulled something from her other pocket. Not a weapon, a smoke grenade. Military issue. Tell them this, the woman said as she pulled the pin. Tyler Brennan is not a criminal. He's a soldier who was failed by everyone who was supposed to protect him. He watched his best friend die because someone made mistakes and nobody was held accountable. He spent months tracking down the people responsible, and he'll finish what he started, because unlike the system, he keeps his promises. She threw the smoke grenade. It exploded in a thick cloud of gray that filled the workshop in seconds. Emma heard Brad and Mike shouting, heard boots pounding toward the entrance. By the time the smoke cleared, the woman was gone. Captain Cross burst through the door with 4 tactical operators behind him. They swept the workshop with weapons raised, checking corners, verifying threats. "Where is she?" Cross demanded. Emma pointed toward the back exit. "She went that way, maybe 30 seconds ago." 2 operators sprinted after her. Cross grabbed his radio and started barking orders. Perimeter security, vehicle checkpoints, aerial surveillance. The full apparatus of military law enforcement mobilizing to catch one woman who'd been trained to disappear. Agent Kane arrived minutes later. He looked at the photograph and calculations still on Emma's workbench, now dusted with residue from the smoke grenade. "Did she threaten you?" Kane asked. "No. She just wanted me to understand, to see Tyler Brennan as a person instead of a target." "And do you see him as a person?" Emma thought about Chris Coleman's photograph, about Tyler Brennan watching his friend die, about the impossible mathematics of justice when the system refuses to provide it. "Yes," she said, "I do, and that's what makes this so hard." The tactical team returned empty-handed. The woman had had a motorcycle waiting 2 blocks away. Security cameras caught her weaving through traffic and disappearing into the civilian areas surrounding the base. By the time local police could coordinate, she was gone. Cross was furious. "She walked right past our surveillance, made contact in broad daylight, and escaped clean. This is exactly the kind of operational security we're dealing with. Brennan has help. He has resources. He's not some desperate soldier acting alone." "No," Thorne said quietly. He'd arrived during the chaos and was now examining the calculations the woman had left behind. "He's a desperate soldier with friends who believe in his cause. That's more dangerous." Kane took the papers and photograph as evidence. "We need to analyze these calculations, figure out where he's planning to take the shot from." Emma watched them work, watched the machine of investigation churn through evidence and produce theories. But her mind was elsewhere. On the woman's words, on Tyler Brennan's impossible mission, on the mathematics of trying to make something right when the universe had already made it wrong. That evening, Kane and Cross debriefed Emma for 3 hours. Every detail of the conversation, every word the woman had said. Emma's impressions, her assessments, her intuitions about what it all meant. Finally, exhausted, they let her go home. Thorne drove her. Neither of them spoke until they were halfway to her apartment. "You did the right thing," Thorne said, calling for backup, not trying to handle it alone. "Then why does it feel wrong?" "Because empathy and duty don't always align. You understand why Tyler is doing this. You might even agree with parts of it, but you also know where it ends." Emma looked out the window at the darkening sky. The woman said Tyler calculated the shot to miss by 2 feet, to send a message instead of killing. "Do you believe that's possible?" "No. At 4,000 meters, 2 feet might as well be 2 miles. You can plan for precision, but you can't guarantee it. Something will shift, something will change, and then people die." Thorne nodded. "That's the difference between Tyler and you. He's convinced himself he can control the uncontrollable. You know better. You've lived what happens when certainty meets chaos." They pulled into Emma's apartment complex. Before she could get out, Thorne handed her a manila envelope. "What's this?" "Analysis from our ballistics team. They decoded the location from those calculations. Observation tower in Bavaria, Germany. Military intelligence conference scheduled there in 48 hours. Colonel Philip Harrington is giving a presentation on intelligence coordination." Emma opened the envelope. satellite photos of the tower, terrain maps, atmospheric data, everything needed to understand what Tyler Brennan was planning. "We're going to Germany," Thorne said. "You, me, Kane, Cross, and a tactical team. We leave tomorrow morning, 0600. "Why me? You have the information. You know where he'll be. You don't need—" "We need someone who can talk to him, someone who understands what he's feeling. Tactical teams can secure a perimeter, but they can't get inside his head." Thorne's expression was serious. Tyler Brennan is going to that tower to make a statement, either with a rifle shot or with his life. Maybe both. The only person who might be able to stop him is someone who's stood where he's standing now. Someone who's faced the choice between justice and revenge and learned the difference. Emma looked at the photos. At the tower where a man she'd barely met was preparing to destroy himself in the name of accountability. What if I can't reach him? Then at least we tried. That's more than the system has done for him so far. Emma took the envelope and got out of the truck, stood in the parking lot watching Thorne drive away, went upstairs to her apartment and spread the satellite photos across her kitchen table. 4,000 meters from tower to conference center, clear line of sight, elevated position with minimal thermal distortion, wind patterns predictable at that altitude. Tyler had chosen well. She pulled out her father's journal, flipped through pages of shooting data and tactical notes until she found the entries she was looking for. The hardest choice a sniper makes isn't whether to take the shot, it's whether to let someone else make a mistake while you watch. Intervention has costs, so does inaction. The only way to know which is right is to understand what you can live with after. Emma closed the journal, made coffee she wouldn't drink, stared at the photos until they blurred. Somewhere in Bavaria, Tyler Brennan was making preparations, calculating angles, accounting for variables, convincing himself that justice and revenge were the same thing when you wrap them in enough precision. Emma knew better. She'd learned the difference between certainty and hope the day a 9-year-old girl named Nadia fell in the dust of Kandahar. No amount of perfect calculations could account for chaos. No amount of skill could guarantee the universe would cooperate with your plans. Tyler Brennan thought he was in control. Emma had to make him understand that control was an illusion, that the only real choice was between destruction and mercy, and she had 48 hours to figure out how. She packed her bag. Not much, she'd learned to travel light years ago. Practical clothes, her father's journal, the photograph of Chris Coleman that Kane had let her copy. Evidence that the people you're trying to save are real, not abstractions. At midnight, unable to sleep, she called the number Thorne had given her. He answered on the first ring. "Emma, I need to know something about my father, about when he died." "What do you need to know?" "You said his last words were about me, about forgiving myself. But what was he doing when the IED went off? What was his mission?" Thorne was quiet for several seconds. "He was providing overwatch for a convoy. Intelligence said the route was clear. Jack didn't trust it. He saw patterns that didn't match the intelligence assessment. He radioed in his concerns, was told to maintain position and trust the information." Emma felt cold. What happened? The convoy was ambushed. Different location than expected, but still an ambush. Jack's position let him provide covering fire. He saved most of the convoy, but he was exposed. The IED was command detonated. Someone was watching him, waiting for the right moment. Who provided the intelligence? You already know. Emma did know. The pattern was clear. Philip Harrington had been providing faulty intelligence for 20 years. Jack Caldwell had questioned it and died. Chris Coleman had relied on it and died. How many others? Tyler isn't wrong, Emma said, about Harrington, about accountability. No, he's not wrong about that. He's only wrong about the method. Justice through violence isn't justice. It's just violence that feels righteous. And if the system won't provide real justice, Then we work to change the system, but we don't become what we're fighting against. Emma knew he was right, but she also knew how inadequate that sounded when you were the one bleeding. When you were the one standing over your best friend's body, or your father's grave, or a child you'd killed by accident. "I'll see you at 0600, she said. "Get some sleep, Emma. Tomorrow's going to be long." But sleep wouldn't come. Emma sat at her kitchen table with her father's journal open, reading entries from operations decades old, seeing the same pattern repeated across years in conflicts. Good intelligence versus convenient intelligence. Truth versus career protection. Soldiers who died because someone prioritized politics over accuracy. Tyler Brennan was trying to break that pattern. He was trying to force accountability through the only means he thought he had left. And Emma was going to Germany to stop him. Not because he was wrong about the problem, but because she'd already learned what happened when certainty met chaos. When perfect plans encountered imperfect reality. She'd learned it the day Nadia died, and she'd spent 4 years trying to forget that lesson. Now it was time to remember. Time to use what she'd learned not to hide, but to save someone else from making the same mistake. The sun rose over Fort Benning. Emma was already awake, already dressed, already standing outside with her bag when Thorne pulled up at 0550. She climbed into the truck without a word. They drove to the airfield where a military transport was waiting. Kane and Cross were already aboard with their tactical team. 8 operators in full kit, checking weapons and equipment with the quiet efficiency of professionals. The plane's engine started with a roar that drowned out thought. Emma strapped into her seat and felt the aircraft accelerate down the runway. Felt the moment when wheels left Earth, and they were committed to whatever came next. 14 hours to Germany. 14 hours to prepare for a conversation with a man she barely knew. A man who was planning to destroy himself in the name of a friend who was already gone. Emma closed her eyes and tried to imagine what she'd say. What words could possibly bridge the gap between understanding and intervention, between empathy and duty? She'd figure it out. She had to. Because Tyler Brennan deserved better than to die for a justice that wouldn't bring back what he'd lost. And Emma deserved the chance to save someone, even if she couldn't save herself. The plane climbed through clouds toward an ocean and a country and a tower where everything would finally come to resolution, one way or another. The flight to Germany felt endless and too short at the same time. Emma sat in the cargo area of the military transport, surrounded by tactical operators who slept in the practiced way of people who'd learned to rest whenever opportunity allowed. Their weapons were racked along the bulkhead, their gear secured in nets overhead. They looked like men prepared for war, not for talking someone down from a ledge. Thorne sat across from her, awake, reading through files on a tablet. Every so often he'd glance at her, checking, assessing, making sure she wasn't falling apart under the weight of what they were about to do. Emma pulled out her father's journal again. She'd read it cover to cover during the flight, absorbing lessons from operations she'd never heard about. Her father had been careful in his entries, never mentioning classified details, but the wisdom came through anyway. The accumulated knowledge of a man who'd spent 20 years looking through rifle scopes at people he might have to kill. One entry stood out. It was dated 3 years before her father died, written after an operation Emma knew nothing about. "Today I held fire. The target was confirmed hostile. The shot was clear. All conditions were perfect. But something felt wrong. A gut feeling that couldn't be quantified or justified in an after-action report. I held fire. Watched through the scope as the target moved away. 20 minutes later, a child ran out from the building where the target had been. 7 years old, maybe 8. If I'd taken the shot with standard explosive rounds, the overpressure would have killed her through the wall. My spotter asked why I held fire. I couldn't explain it then. I can't explain it now. But that child is alive because I trusted something deeper than training." Emma traced the words with her finger. Her father had understood. He'd known that perfect conditions and clear orders weren't always enough, that sometimes you had to trust the part of yourself that calculated things the conscious mind couldn't process. She'd had that feeling in Kandahar, a whisper of wrongness just as her finger tightened on the trigger. But she'd ignored it, trusted her calculations instead of her instinct, and Nadia had died because of it. What if Tyler Brennan was hearing that same whisper right now? What if somewhere deep down he knew his plan couldn't work, that the mathematics of 4,000 meters would betray him? Would he listen, or would he ignore it the way Emma had? Captain Cross approached, crouching beside her seat. "We'll be landing in 40 minutes. I need you to understand the tactical situation we're walking into." Emma closed the journal and gave him her attention. "The German Federal Police have established a perimeter around the observation tower," Cross continued. "They haven't approached it yet. We asked them to hold position until we arrived. But they're nervous. This is their country, their jurisdiction. If they perceive an imminent threat, they'll move regardless of our request to wait." What does that mean? It means we have a very narrow window. If Brennan opens fire or makes any hostile move, GSG-9 will breach the tower. They're good at what they do, but Brennan is better. A forced entry will likely end with casualties on both sides. Then we can't let it get to that point. That's why you're here. Cross's expression was still skeptical, but something had softened. "Agent Kane thinks you can reach him. Colonel Thorne believes it too. I'm not convinced a technician has the psychological training to talk down a trained operator in crisis. But I'm willing to be wrong if it saves lives." "I appreciate your confidence," Emma said dryly. Cross almost smiled. "The conference center has been evacuated. All attendees, including Colonel Harrington, have been moved to a secure location in Munich. The building is empty. If Brennan takes his shot, he'll be shooting at nothing. Have you told him that?" "Not yet. We want to preserve the illusion that the operation is proceeding as planned. If Brennan knows the target has been moved, he might abort, or he might escalate to find Harrington elsewhere. We're trying to contain this to a situation where nobody gets hurt." Emma understood the logic, but she also understood Tyler Brennan had probably anticipated this exact countermeasure. He wasn't stupid. He knew they'd evacuate, which meant he had a backup plan, or he was planning to make his statement regardless of whether Harrington was actually present. The plane began its descent. Emma felt her ears pop as pressure equalized. Through the small windows, she could see darkness giving way to dawn. They were arriving at the beginning of a new day in Bavaria. The conference was scheduled to begin at 1500 hours. They had roughly 8 hours to resolve a situation that had been building for 9 months. The landing was rough, the way military transports always landed. The pilot didn't care about comfort, only about getting on the ground quickly. The rear ramp lowered before they'd fully stopped, cold German air rushing in to replace the stale cabin atmosphere. A convoy of vehicles waited on the tarmac. German police, American military, and several unmarked sedans that probably contained intelligence officers from multiple agencies. This had become an international incident now. The pressure to resolve it cleanly was enormous. Agent Kane emerged from one of the sedans. He looked like he hadn't slept, which he probably hadn't. Emma knew from experience that field operations ran on coffee and adrenaline more than actual rest. "We have a positive heat signature in the tower," Kane said as they gathered around a satellite image displayed on a tablet. "One person, located on the top floor observation deck. They've been there for at least 6 hours based on thermal patterns. No movement in the past hour." "Could be sleeping," one of the tactical operators suggested. "Could be waiting," Thorne countered. "Sniper operations involve a lot of waiting. Brennan knows how to stay still." The tower was visible in the distance, a stone structure from another century perched on a mountain ridge. It looked like something from a fairy tale, picturesque and historic, not a place where modern violence should unfold. Below it, perhaps 4 kilometers away, sat the conference center, a modern building of glass and steel, currently empty but designed to look occupied. Lights on in strategic locations, vehicles in the parking lot, security personnel visible at entrances. An elaborate stage set designed to maintain the illusion that nothing had changed. The conference was supposed to start at 1500, Kane said, checking his watch. It's 0730 now. We have 7.5 hours. Or we have no time at all, Thorne said quietly. Brennan might not wait for the scheduled start. He might take his shot whenever he feels conditions are right. Wind, light, atmospheric pressure, those don't follow human schedules. Cross turned to his tactical team. I want eyes on that tower from 3 positions. Long-range surveillance, no approach unless I give direct orders. If you see anything, any indication he's preparing to fire, you notify me immediately. But nobody moves without authorization. Clear? The operators nodded and dispersed to their vehicles. Emma felt disconnected from her body, like she was watching herself from a distance. This was really happening. She was really in Germany, preparing to talk to a man who might kill someone or die himself in the next few hours. Thorne touched her elbow gently. You ready? No, but I don't think ready exists for something like this. They drove in a 2-vehicle convoy up winding mountain roads. The landscape was beautiful in the early morning light, forests giving way to rocky slopes, the kind of pristine wilderness that made you forget human violence existed. Emma tried to appreciate it, tried to ground herself in something other than anxiety. It didn't work. The German police had established their perimeter 1 kilometer from the tower. Uniformed officers stood behind barriers, rifles visible but not raised. They watched the American convoy arrive with expressions that mixed cooperation with territorial concern. Kane spoke with the German commander in fluent German. Emma caught enough words to understand they were negotiating authority and jurisdiction, the complicated dance of international cooperation during a crisis. Finally, Kane returned. They've agreed to hold position while we attempt to make contact, but if shots are fired, or if we exceed our time window, they take control. Their patience has limits. Cross set up a command post in one of the vehicles. Radios, monitors showing surveillance feeds, satellite imagery updated in real time. He pulled up an audio system capable of broadcasting to the tower from their current position. We'll establish contact first, Cross said. Let Brennan know we're here, that we want to talk. We'll offer him a chance to surrender peacefully. Standard hostage negotiation protocols, even though technically he's not holding a hostage, except himself. Let me talk to him, Emma said. Everyone turned to look at her. We talked about this on the plane, Cross said. I appreciate your willingness to help, but initial contact should be handled by someone trained in... Trained in what? Talking to people who've lost everything? Emma's voice was sharper than she intended. Tyler Brennan doesn't need protocols. He needs someone who understands why he's up there. Someone who stood where he's standing. Thorne nodded slowly. She's right. Brennan knows we'd send negotiators. He's prepared for that. He's not prepared for Emma. Kane looked between them, calculating risks and probabilities. Finally, he handed Emma a radio headset. Keep him talking. Find out his state of mind, whether he's still committed to taking the shot. Don't make promises we can't keep, but do whatever you can to keep him engaged. The longer he talks, the less likely he is to pull a trigger. Emma put on the headset. The earpiece felt foreign, intrusive. She could hear radio chatter from the German police, from Cross's tactical team, from air traffic control redirecting civilian flights away from the area. A symphony of people trying to prevent violence. She keyed the microphone. Her voice would be broadcast through the speaker system, powerful enough to reach the tower clearly. Tyler Brennan. Her voice echoed across the mountainside, bouncing off rocks and trees. My name is Emma Caldwell. Jack Caldwell was my father. You know who I am. You know what I did. Silence. Just the wind and the distant sound of ravens calling to each other. Emma tried again. Chris Coleman told my father I had a gift with rifles, that I understood them in ways most people don't. He was right about that. But he didn't know what I'd done with that gift. He didn't know that 4 years ago, in Kandahar province, I killed a 9-year-old girl. More silence, but different this time. The quality of attention shifting, someone listening. Her name was Nadia, Emma continued. I was providing overwatch for a supply convoy. Saw an insurgent setting up an ambush position, 2,100 meters. Conditions were perfect. I made the calculations, checked my wind holds, controlled my breathing. Everything by the book. I squeezed the trigger. Her voice cracked slightly. She forced herself to continue. The wind shifted half a second before the bullet arrived. Just a small gust. Nothing my instruments detected. The bullet deviated 14 inches, hit Nadia instead of the insurgent. She was playing with a doll 20 feet from him. I watched through my scope as she fell, watched her mother run to her, watched them both disappear in the dust. The radio crackled. Then a voice, distorted by distance and amplification, but recognizably human. Emma Caldwell, Jack's daughter. Chris told me about you, said you were the best shot he'd ever heard of, but you walked away. Emma felt tears on her face. She didn't wipe them away. I walked away because I couldn't trust myself anymore, because I learned that perfect calculations and perfect conditions don't guarantee perfect outcomes, because I killed someone who didn't deserve to die, and no amount of skill could undo it. Then you understand, Tyler's voice came back. You understand why Harrington has to face consequences, why someone has to make this right. I understand wanting that. I understand the mathematics of justice when the system fails. But Tyler, I also understand the mathematics of 4,000 meters. And they don't work the way you think they do. Thorne was watching her intently. Cross had headphones on, monitoring the conversation while tracking Tyler's thermal signature on surveillance feeds. The German police were standing at attention, sensing that something important was happening, even if they couldn't understand all the English. You told Natasha you calculated the shot to miss Harrington by 2 feet, Emma said. To shatter the window next to him. To send a message without killing. I need you to listen to me very carefully. At 4,000 meters, you cannot control 2 feet. Physics won't allow it. I've practiced this shot for 6 months, Tyler responded. I know every variable. I've studied this location, these wind patterns, every possible factor that could affect the trajectory. I can make this shot. So could I. I thought I could control 2,100 meters down to the inch. I was wrong by 14 inches. That's all it took. 14 inches between hitting my target and killing a child. This is different. I'm not aiming at a person. I'm aiming 2 feet to the left of where Harrington will be standing. And what if you're 2 feet to the right instead? What if thermal layers you can't see push the bullet? What if the bullet tumbles after going subsonic? What if the Earth itself shifts in some microscopic way that your calculations can't account for? Emma's voice rose. Tyler, you're trying to thread a needle in a hurricane. The universe doesn't care about your intentions. It doesn't care about justice or revenge or messages. It only cares about physics. And physics at 4,000 meters is chaos pretending to be predictable. The radio was silent for 30 seconds. Emma waited, letting her words settle, letting Tyler process what she'd said. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. What do you want from me, Emma? I want you to tell me what you're really doing up there, because I don't think this is about sending a message. I think this is about dying for Chris Coleman. I think you're up in that tower preparing to make a shot you know you can't make. And when it fails, when you hit someone innocent, or when the tactical teams storm your position, you'll die too. And you think that's justice. That's what Chris would have wanted. Chris wanted his death to mean something. Chris wanted you to live, Emma said firmly. He wanted you to go home, to see his mother and his fiancée, to tell them stories about who he was. He didn't want you to throw your life away on revenge, dressed up as accountability. It's not revenge. Harrington needs to face consequences. Then face him in a courtroom. Testify to what happened. Force an investigation through testimony, through evidence, through the one weapon Harrington can't defend against, truth. Don't give him the satisfaction of turning you into the villain. Don't let him walk away saying, "See, this soldier was unstable. His claims can't be trusted." Thorne leaned close to Emma and whispered, "Keep going. You're reaching him." Emma took a breath. "Tyler, when Nadia died, I wanted to die too. I wanted someone to punish me the way I felt I deserved to be punished. So I punished myself. I made myself invisible, took a job where nobody would notice me, where I could hide from what I'd done. I spent 4 years in silence, thinking that was atonement. Did it work? No. It just made me disappear. The guilt didn't go away. The memory didn't fade. I just became a ghost haunting my own life." Emma's voice softened. "But then Colonel Thorne found me. He told me what my father said before he died. He said my father forgave me for everything, and he asked me when I'd forgive myself. How do you forgive yourself for killing someone? I don't know yet. I'm still figuring that out. But I know hiding doesn't work, and I know dying doesn't work. The only thing that might work is living. Living and helping others not make the same mistakes. Living and turning pain into something useful instead of something destructive." Tyler was silent again. Emma could hear wind across the microphone on his end. Could imagine him in the tower, rifle set up, looking down at the conference center through a scope, calculating, reconsidering, fighting with himself. "Come down," Emma said gently. "Come down and help me figure out how to live with what we've done, because I can't do it alone. And I don't think you can either. If I come down, they'll arrest me, court-martial, prison. Yes, but you'll be alive. You'll have the chance to testify about what happened to Chris, to expose Harrington properly, to make sure other soldiers don't die the same way. You can do more for Chris's memory from a courtroom than from a grave." Cross was making hand signals. The German police were getting restless, checking watches, having urgent conversations with their commanders. Time was running out. Thorne took the radio. "Tyler Brennan, this is Colonel Garrett Thorne. I served with Jack Caldwell, and I knew Chris Coleman. I was also the officer who first questioned the intelligence that got your convoy ambushed. I was ignored. Then I was discharged for being too honest about command failures." Tyler's voice came back cautious. "I know who you are, Colonel. Chris mentioned you, said you were one of the good ones. I tried to be, but I failed when it mattered most. I questioned Harrington's intelligence 15 years ago and was told to trust the system. So I did. And 6 months later, that same intelligence got 11 soldiers killed. If I'd fought harder, if I hadn't taken the easy path of retirement with benefits, maybe those soldiers would still be alive." Emma hadn't heard this part before. She looked at Thorne, saw the weight of years in his expression. "I'm telling you this," Thorne continued, "because I don't want you to spend the rest of your life regretting the choice you make in the next hour. I've spent 15 years regretting mine, wondering if I could have prevented the deaths that came after. Tyler, you have a chance to do what I didn't, to stand up and fight the system in a way that actually creates change. But you can't do that if you're dead or imprisoned for murder. Harrington walks free while Chris is in the ground. How is that justice? It's not, but killing Harrington, or trying to, doesn't balance the scales. It just adds more weight. Chris Coleman doesn't need you to die for him. He needs you to live for him, to make sure his death leads to real change in how the military handles intelligence. That's justice. Everything else is just rage." The radio crackled with interference. Emma could hear Tyler breathing, could hear the strain in each breath. A man on the edge of a decision that would define the rest of his life. Kane's phone buzzed. He looked at it and swore quietly. Harrington just issued a statement to the press. He's calling this a terrorist incident, saying Tyler Brennan is unstable, making unfounded accusations. He's controlling the narrative before Tyler even has a chance to tell his story. Emma felt rage bloom in her chest. Harrington was already protecting himself, already spinning this to make Tyler look like the villain. The system protecting its own at the expense of truth. She keyed the microphone again. "Tyler, Harrington just went public. He's calling you unstable. He's discrediting you before you can testify. If you take this shot, if you give him violence to point to, he wins. He gets to say, see, this soldier was dangerous. Nothing he claims can be trusted. You'll prove his narrative for him. Then I've already lost. No, you haven't, because there's one thing Harrington can't control. He can't control the truth if you're alive to tell it. He can't discredit a soldier who surrenders peacefully and then demands a public investigation. The media loves a story about cover-ups and accountability. You give them that story by living, not by dying. Cross was on his radio with the German police. They're giving us 15 more minutes. After that, they're going in. 15 minutes. Emma looked at Thorne, at Kane, at the tactical operators preparing to storm a tower if necessary, at all the machinery of violence preparing to solve a problem that shouldn't be solved with violence. Tyler, Emma said, her voice breaking, please, I know what it's like to pull a trigger and have everything go wrong. I know what it's like to watch someone die because of your choice. I've been living with that for 4 years, and I still don't know how to make it right. But I know dying doesn't help. And I know killing someone else, even someone who deserves it, doesn't help. It just adds more ghosts to the collection you're already carrying. How do I face Chris's mother, his fiancée? How do I tell them I didn't pull the trigger so their son's death still means nothing? You tell them you chose to live for him instead of die for him. That you're going to spend the rest of your life making sure what happened to Chris never happens to anyone else. Not through violence, through truth, through testimony, through being alive to hold people accountable in ways that actually matter. The sun was higher now, warming the mountain air. Emma could see the tower clearly, could see the observation deck where Tyler was positioned, could imagine him looking through his scope one last time at the conference center below. The radio crackled. Emma, I'm here. Tell me something. That girl, Nadia, do you think about her every day? Emma closed her eyes. Yes, every single day. Does it get easier? No, but it gets different. The pain doesn't go away, but you learn to carry it better. You learn to use it to help others instead of destroying yourself. That's the only thing I've figured out so far. I don't want to destroy myself. I just want Chris's death to matter. Then make it matter by living. Come down, surrender, tell your story, force the investigation that should have happened 9 months ago. Chris's death matters because you're still here to fight for accountability. It stops mattering the second you pull that trigger. Silence. 30 seconds. 60. The German police commander was walking toward Kane, his expression urgent. Time had run out. Then movement on the surveillance feed. The thermal signature in the tower shifting. Standing. Moving toward the stairs. He's moving, Cross said quietly. Stand by for possible exit. Emma held her breath. Watch the monitors. Watch the tower entrance. 5 minutes later, the door opened. Tyler Brennan emerged with his hands raised. He was wearing civilian clothes, no weapon visible. He looked exhausted, like someone who'd been carrying impossible weight for too long and finally allowed himself to set it down. German police moved in cautiously, directing him to kneel, securing him with practiced efficiency. Tyler complied with everything, didn't resist, didn't argue, just knelt in the dirt with his hands behind his head while officers searched him and applied restraints. Cross and his tactical team moved toward the tower. Emma started to follow, but Thorne stopped her. Let them secure the scene first. You'll get your chance to talk to him. Emma watched as Tyler was led to a police vehicle. He looked in her direction, though she doubted he could see her at this distance. But his expression was clear even from far away. Exhausted, relieved, grateful. Cross's team emerged from the tower carrying Tyler's equipment. The Barrett rifle, meticulously maintained. A spotting scope. Notebooks filled with calculations. All the tools of a man who'd spent 6 months preparing for a shot he'd never take. 20 minutes later, Emma was allowed to approach. Tyler sat in the back of a police vehicle, hands cuffed, with a German officer standing guard. Kane spoke to the officer in German, negotiating a moment of privacy. Finally, the officer stepped back. Emma approached the open vehicle door. Tyler looked at her. Up close, she could see how young he was. 28, but right now, he looked 18. Vulnerable. Lost. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For understanding, for not judging, for showing me there's a difference between justice and destruction." Emma sat on the edge of the vehicle seat. "I'm still figuring that out myself, but I think the first step is choosing to live, even when living feels harder than dying. They're going to court-martial me, prison time, dishonorable discharge. I know, but you'll be alive, and alive means you can still fight, still tell the truth, still make Chris's death mean something." Tyler nodded slowly. "His mother, Sarah, his fiancée, will you help me figure out what to say to them?" "Yes, we'll figure it out together." German police were coordinating with American military. Tyler would be transferred to U.S. custody, flown back to Fort Bragg, processed through the military justice system, the machinery of accountability grinding forward, slow but inexorable. As they led Tyler away to be transported, he looked back at Emma one more time. "That girl, Nadia, does it ever stop hurting?" Emma thought about lying, about offering comfort that didn't exist. But Tyler deserved the truth. "No, it never stops, but you learn to carry it. And you learn that carrying it is better than letting it carry you." Tyler nodded. Then he was gone, surrounded by officers and agents, disappearing into the bureaucratic process that would determine his future. Thorne approached, put a hand on Emma's shoulder. "You did good work today, saved a man's life." "He saved himself. I just gave him permission." Sometimes that's what people need most. Permission to choose differently. The convoy began the journey back down the mountain. Emma sat in the same vehicle as before, but everything felt different now. Lighter somehow, like she'd set down weight she hadn't realized she was carrying. Kane turned from the front seat. "That was exceptional work, Miss Caldwell. Real psychological warfare. You got inside his head in ways our trained negotiators couldn't have." "I just told him the truth. That's the hardest thing to do in a crisis. Everyone else was offering tactics. You offered understanding." Cross, sitting next to Kane, actually nodded in agreement. "I was wrong about you, about thinking a technician couldn't handle field operations. You handled that better than most trained operators would have. I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who's made enough mistakes to recognize them in others." They flew back to the United States that evening. Tyler was on a separate transport, already in military custody. Emma sat in the cargo area again, but this time she slept. Deep, dreamless sleep. The first real rest she'd had in 4 years. When she woke, they were over the Atlantic. Thorne was still awake, still watching over things the way he'd been doing since he promised Jack Caldwell he would. "What happens now?" Emma asked. "For Tyler? Court-martial. He'll face charges for desertion, for unauthorized operations. But with proper representation, with testimony about PTSD and system failures, he might get a reduced sentence. 4 years, maybe 5. Eligible for parole in 2.5. And Harrington? That's more complicated. But Tyler's case has already generated media attention. Questions are being asked. Investigations reopened. Sometimes the system works, just very slowly." Emma looked out the small window at darkness broken by occasional lights far below. Cities and towns where people lived normal lives, unaware of the violence that had almost happened and the lives that had been saved. "Thorne, Garrett, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why did you really keep your promise to my father? You could have checked on me from a distance, made sure I was alive and moved on. Why get involved?" Thorne was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice carried weight that went beyond words. "Because Jack Caldwell saved my life. Not in combat, in the way that matters more. When I was pushed out of the military, when I was angry and bitter and considering doing something stupid, Jack sat with me. talked me through it, made me see that my life had value beyond the uniform. He saved me from destroying myself. I owed him. And more than that, I cared about him. He was my friend, the best friend I've had. So when he asked me to watch over his daughter, it wasn't a burden. It was an honor. Emma felt tears again, but these were different tears. Not grief, but gratitude. Thank you for keeping that promise, for not giving up on me even when I'd given up on myself. Your father knew what you'd do if things went wrong. He knew you'd try to disappear. He made me promise to find you and drag you back into the light. I'm just glad I got the chance. They landed at Fort Bragg as dawn was breaking, the same airport they'd left from, but everything had changed in the space between departure and return. Kane and Cross supervised Tyler's transfer to the military detention facility. Emma watched from a distance as he was led away, still in restraints, but walking with something that looked like purpose. He'd made his choice. Now he'd live with the consequences. But living was better than the alternative. Over the following weeks, the machinery of military justice ground forward. Tyler was formally charged, assigned defense counsel, and scheduled for a court-martial 3 months away. The media picked up the story. Questions were asked about intelligence failures, about accountability, about soldiers who fell through the cracks of a system that claimed to support them. And slowly, reluctantly, an investigation into Colonel Philip Harrington's conduct over the past 20 years was opened. Not because the military wanted to investigate, but because public pressure and media attention made it impossible not to. Emma was called to testify at Tyler's court-martial. She told the panel of officers about Tyler's technical sophistication, about the calculations he'd made, about the conversation in Bavaria where she'd talked him down from an action that would have destroyed him. She also told them about Nadia, about the shot at 2,100 meters that had gone wrong, about 4 years of hiding and how Tyler's case had forced her to confront her own past. The courtroom was silent when she finished. Several officers were wiping their eyes. Tyler's defense attorney, a sharp woman named Captain Jennifer Martinez, used Emma's testimony to argue that Tyler had shown judgment even in crisis, that he'd surrendered when given the chance, that he'd chosen life over revenge when someone he trusted gave him permission to make that choice. The prosecution painted Tyler as dangerous, unstable, a soldier who'd gone rogue and endangered international relations. They asked for 10 years. The panel deliberated for 6 hours. The sentence was 4 years in a military prison, with eligibility for parole after 2.5 years. Dishonorable discharge. Loss of military benefits. Harsh, but not as harsh as it could have been. When the sentence was read, Tyler looked at Emma from across the courtroom. He mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." Emma nodded. "You're welcome. Now live. Make it count." 3 months after Tyler's court-martial, the investigation into Colonel Philip Harrington concluded. He was found guilty of falsifying intelligence reports, of dereliction of duty, of prioritizing career advancement over soldier safety. The evidence was overwhelming once investigators were actually willing to look. He was court-martialed, stripped of rank, given a dishonorable discharge. He'd spend no time in prison. Politics protected him from that, but his career was destroyed, his reputation ruined. His legacy would forever be tied to the soldiers who died because of his mistakes. It wasn't perfect justice, but it was something. Accountability, finally, after 20 years. Emma watched the proceedings from the public gallery, saw Harrington's face as the verdict was read, saw the moment he realized he couldn't escape consequences anymore, that Tyler Brennan's refusal to take the shot had, paradoxically, hit the target better than any bullet could have. After the verdict, Emma visited Chris Coleman's grave at Arlington National Cemetery. She'd never met him, but she'd heard enough stories to feel like she knew him. Young, optimistic, engaged to be married, full of plans that would never come to fruition. She placed flowers on his headstone. "Your friend Tyler is going to be okay. He made the right choice. I think you'd be proud of him. I think you'd be proud of what came from your death. Not the death itself, but the accountability it eventually led to. The changes it's already starting to create in how the military handles intelligence. That's your legacy, Chris. Real change. That's worth more than revenge. The cemetery was quiet except for wind through the trees. Emma stood there for a long time, talking to a man she'd never met about a friendship she'd never witnessed. But somehow, it felt right. Felt like closing a circle that had been broken. She visited her father's grave next. Jack Caldwell's headstone was simple. Rank, name, dates, beloved father. Nothing about the lives he'd saved, the soldiers he'd trained, the legacy he'd left. "I'm not hiding anymore, Dad," Emma said quietly. "Colonel Thorne found me like you asked him to. He dragged me back into the light. I'm living now. Not just surviving, actually living. I'm teaching ballistics at the base. Your old position, actually. Thorne retired and recommended me for the job." They hesitated. "I'm just a civilian technician with no formal teaching credentials. But Thorne can be very persuasive when he wants to be." She smiled, wiping away tears. "I'm teaching soldiers about more than just shooting. I'm teaching them about judgment, about when not to take the shot, about understanding that precision isn't the same as control. I tell them about Nadia, about what happens when you trust calculations more than instinct. Some of them think I'm crazy for admitting that, but most of them get it. They understand that the best shooters aren't the ones who never miss. They're the ones who understand what it means when they do." A breeze rustled the trees. Emma imagined it was her father's approval. Or maybe just wind. Sometimes the difference didn't matter. "Thorne gave me your journal. I've read it cover to cover. Used some of your lessons in my teaching. The students love the stories, even though I have to keep the classified parts vague. You were a good teacher, Dad. I'm trying to be half as good as you were." She stood to leave, then turned back. "Oh, and Dad, I'm forgiving myself. Not all at once, not completely, but a little bit every day. I think that's what you wanted. For me to learn that mistakes don't have to define you, that you can carry pain without letting it destroy you. I'm learning, slowly, but I'm learning." The sun was setting as Emma walked back to her car. The sky was on fire with colors that hurt to look at. But Emma looked anyway. Let the beauty hurt. Let it remind her that being alive meant feeling everything, even the painful things. 6 months later, Emma received a letter from Tyler. He was allowed limited correspondence from prison, and he'd chosen to use some of it writing to her. The letter was short but powerful. He talked about therapy, about processing Chris's death in healthier ways, about a purpose he'd found in teaching other veterans how to handle grief and anger, about counting down the days until parole, when he could start making real amends to Chris's family. He thanked Emma again, told her that every day he was grateful she'd talked him down from that tower, that she'd given him permission to choose life over death, purpose over revenge. At the bottom of the letter he'd written, "That girl, Nadia, you carry her every day. I understand now. We carry the people we've lost or hurt, and the weight never goes away. But you taught me that carrying it is better than letting it crush you. I'm carrying Chris now, not as a burden demanding revenge, but as a reminder to live better than I did before. Thank you for showing me the difference." Emma folded the letter carefully and placed it in her father's journal. Evidence that pain could be transformed into something useful, that mistakes could become lessons, that the people we lose stay with us in ways that matter. Her teaching position had become permanent. She had 20 students in her advanced ballistics course, learning the science of precision shooting, but more importantly, learning the psychology of it, when to shoot, when to hold fire, how to live with the choices you make. She'd started a program for veterans struggling with PTSD, a safe space to talk about the shots they'd taken, the ones they hadn't, the ways violence stayed with you long after the fighting stopped. Thorne helped her run it, bringing his decades of experience and his own hard-won wisdom about surviving trauma. Colonel Garrett Thorne had become more than a mentor. He'd become family, the grandfather figure Emma had never had, filling some of the emptiness left by her father's death. They had dinner once a week, talked about teaching strategies and military politics and the slow work of healing. One evening, over coffee at their usual diner, Thorne handed Emma a newspaper article. It was about military intelligence reforms, new oversight procedures, mandatory review processes, protections for soldiers who question faulty information. "This is because of Tyler," Thorne said. "His case exposed enough failures that they couldn't ignore them anymore. Real change. Not perfect, but real." Emma read the article, feeling a complicated mix of emotions. Chris Coleman had died because the system failed, but his death had eventually led to changes that might prevent future deaths. Tyler's near-catastrophic choice had been transformed into accountability. Emma's intervention had saved a life that was now saving others. Circles within circles. Pain transformed into purpose. "You know what the hardest part is?" Emma said. "I still think about Nadia every single day. It still hurts, but now it hurts differently, like scar tissue instead of an open wound. I'm learning to live with it." "That's all any of us can do," Thorne said. "Live with it. Honor the dead by living better than we did before." Emma's phone buzzed. A text from one of her students, a young woman, just 23, who'd been struggling with a decision about whether to re-enlist. She'd been in a firefight where she'd frozen, hadn't taken shots she should have taken. Now she was consumed by guilt about the might-have-beens. Emma had worked with her for weeks, helping her understand that freezing was a normal response to trauma. That judgment about when to shoot required more than just technical skill. That sometimes not shooting was the right choice, even if it felt wrong at the time. The text read, "I'm staying in, going to train as an instructor instead of frontline. Figure I can help more people by teaching them what you taught me. Thank you for showing me there's more than one way to serve." Emma showed Thorne the message. He smiled. "Jack would be proud. Of you, of your students, of the legacy you're building. Teaching soldiers to think instead of just react. That's worth more than 1,000 perfect shots." I wish he could see it. He can, through me, through you, through every student you teach who goes on to make better decisions because of what you showed them. Thorne's expression was serious but warm. "Your father believed that the best snipers weren't the ones who never missed. They were the ones who understood the weight of every shot. You're teaching that now. You're passing on his real legacy." They finished their coffee and drove back to the base. Emma had a class tomorrow morning, advanced ballistics for officer candidates. She'd spend 2 hours teaching them about wind, about distance, about the Coriolis effect and atmospheric pressure, and all the technical factors that determine where bullets went. But she'd also spend time teaching them about judgment, about the shots you don't take, about living with consequences, about understanding that precision and control weren't the same thing. And at the end of every class, she'd tell them about Nadia, about a 9-year-old girl who died because Emma trusted calculations more than instinct, about 4 years of hiding and what it took to come back to the light. Some students would be uncomfortable. Some would think she was oversharing, but most would understand, would grasp that the lesson wasn't about technique. It was about responsibility, about carrying weight, about choosing to live with pain instead of being destroyed by it. That night, alone in her apartment, Emma opened her father's journal one last time. She'd read every page dozens of times now, had internalized most of the lessons, but there was one entry she kept coming back to. "Emma will be better than me, not because she shoots better, though she does, but because she understands the weight of every shot. She feels it in ways I never could. That gift will hurt her, but it will also make her extraordinary. When she's ready to accept it." Emma picked up a pen. For the first time in 4 years, she added an entry to her father's journal. Her handwriting looked like his. They'd both learned the same careful script in the same circumstances, recording important information that might save lives. I'm ready now, Dad. It took 4 years, a soldier named Tyler Brennan, and a man named Garrett Thorne who kept his promise to you. But I'm ready. I understand now that my gift isn't about shooting. It's about understanding what shooting means, about teaching others to carry that weight without being crushed by it, about transforming pain into purpose. Nadia is still with me. She'll always be with me. But now she's not just a source of pain, she's a reminder, a teacher. Every time I instruct a student to think before shooting, to check their instinct against their calculations, to understand that perfect conditions don't guarantee perfect outcomes, I'm honoring her, turning her death into lessons that might prevent future deaths. I wish I could have saved her. I can't, but I can save others by teaching what I learned from losing her. That's the only atonement I know how to make, and I'm making it every day. I'm living now, Dad, really living, not hiding, not surviving, living with purpose and pain and hope all mixed together, just like you taught me. Thank you for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself. Thank you for sending Garrett to find me. Thank you for forgiving me even before I knew I needed forgiveness. I love you. I miss you. And I'm doing the work you trained me for. Not just shooting, but thinking, judging, understanding, living with the weight of choices. Your daughter, Emma. She closed the journal and placed it on the shelf next to a photograph. The photo showed her father in uniform, young and strong, before war and loss had carved lines into his face. He was smiling. Emma couldn't remember seeing him smile like that in her lifetime, but the photo proved he'd been capable of joy once. Maybe joy would come back to her too. Not today, not tomorrow, but someday, when enough time had passed, when enough students had learned, when enough pain had been transformed into purpose. Until then, she'd keep teaching, keep living, keep carrying Nadia and Chris Coleman and all the other ghosts that soldiers accumulated. Keep showing others that carrying was possible. That weight didn't have to mean destruction. Emma turned off the lights and went to bed. She'd have dreams tonight. She always did. Sometimes about Kandahar, sometimes about Bavaria, sometimes about students she'd taught or conversations she'd had. The dreams would be vivid and painful and necessary. But when she woke, she'd get up. She'd put on her clothes. She'd drive to the base. She'd stand in front of a classroom of young soldiers and teach them the most important lesson her father ever gave her. The hardest shot is the one you choose not to take. Because living with that choice requires more courage than pulling any trigger. And Emma Caldwell had enough courage for both.